Bring, bring. Bring, bring. Bring, bring. Hello? Yes, hello. Ah, yes. Yeah, I know what this is. This is day 68 of the 100 Days of Narration challenge. I don't know, I'm just running out of interesting ways to introduce this particular challenge thing. Anyway, day 68. So, in the middle of Roald Dahl week, if you weren't here previously to hear that. And, Today, what are we going to do today? Today, we are going to read The Fantastic Mr. Fox, or rather just Fantastic Mr. Fox. There is no the or the at the beginning, so that's just to confuse and waylay those who do not understand the fantasticness of Mr. Fox. Anyway, as I just mentioned before, I was going to read this sometime before, and yeah, this is also another one of those young puffin books, read alone. I didn't realize that until I picked this up. I thought it was, because it's quite a decent-sized thing. I mean, it's not like 60 pages like The Magic Finger. The Magic Finger! The Magic Finger. It's actually just 90 pages. So just about 30 pages more than the previous one. The Magic Finger. So, the Fantastic Mr. Fox. No, the beginning. God, Edwin, stop doing that. Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald Dahl. What can I say about it? Well, let's read the blurb on the back. Most of you should be familiar with this book already because of the George Clooney film. Am I really going to use that as a reference? Why not? Yeah, the film with George Clooney as Mr. Fox. Let's read the blurb at the back here. Bogus, Bunce, and Bean are just about the nastiest and meanest three farmers you could meet, and they hate Mr. Fox. They are determined to get him, so they lie in wait outside his hole, each one crouching behind a tree with his gun loaded, ready to shoot, starve, or dig him out. But clever, handsome Mr. Fox has other plans. And it's a read-alone book, first solo reading, ideal for building confidence. And now here I am, 20 years later, reading it out to you. Well, about 20 years later. You know what? I think I'm going to start from the beginning, because I remember it being the introduction of the three farmers is quite awesome. There's a lot of illustrations in this, actually. They're quite beautiful, beautiful things. Wish you could see them, really. I don't know if they're in later editions of Fantastic Mr. Fox. Maybe they are. Maybe all the pictures are in there. But if you get the chance, you know, try to find Fantastic Mr. Fox, because it's got some quite lovely illustrations. Very English illustrations. Like wood cuttings or whatever. Anyway, we're going to start from the very beginning for this one. No flipping. Well, I'll flip it. I'll flip it just for you. Just for you. Just for you. You know who you are. But I am just starting from the beginning here. And apparently illustrated by Jill Bennett. Jill Bennett. So that's probably something I should read as well. Mention as well. So written by Roald Dahl, illustrated by Jill Bennett. Oh God, burping. I just realized, did I burp for yesterday's book? Maybe I didn't. Maybe that was the one book I didn't burp for. Oh my God! But sadly, today I burped. I do apologize. Okay, Chapter 1. Chapter 1, The Three Farmers. Down in the valley there were 3 farms. The owners of these farms had done well. They were rich men. They were also nasty men. All 3 of them were about as nasty and mean as any men you could meet. Their names were Farmer Bogus, Farmer Bunce, and Farmer Bean. I like the fact that they don't actually have first names. Or maybe those are their first names, but I don't think so. Bogus was a chicken farmer. He kept thousands of chickens. He was enormously fat. This was because he ate 3 boiled chickens smothered with dumplings every day for breakfast, lunch, and supper. And there's a picture of him, too, eating said chickens. Boiled chickens? Ew. Bunce was a duck and goose farmer. He kept thousands of ducks and geese. He was a kind of pot-bellied dwarf. He was so short his chin would have been underwater in the shallow end of any swimming pool in the world. His food was donuts and goose livers. He mashed the livers into a disgusting paste and then stuffed the paste into the donuts. This diet gave him a tummy ache and a beastly temper. So why continue eating it, Bunce? Why do you continue eating it? Bean was a turkey and apple farmer. He kept thousands of turkeys in an orchard full of apple trees. He never ate any food at all. Instead, he drank gallons of strong cider which he made from the apples in his orchard. He was as thin as a pencil and the cleverest of them all. And now we have a little rhyme. Boggis and Bunce and Bean, one fat, one short, one lean. These horrible crooks, so different in looks, were nonetheless equally mean. That is what the children round used to sing when they saw them. Now we get to chapter 2. These are short chapters. Mr. Fox. On a hill above the valley there was a wood. In the wood there was a huge tree. Under the tree there was a hole. In the hole lived Mr. Fox and Mrs. Fox and their four small foxes. Every evening, as soon as it got dark, Mr. Fox would say to Mrs. Fox, "Well, my darling, what shall it be this time? A plump chicken from Boggis, a duck or a goose from Bunce, or a nice turkey from Bean?" And when Mrs. Fox had told him what she wanted, Mr. Fox would creep down into the valley in the darkness of the night and help himself. Boggis and Bunce and Bean knew very well what was going on, and it made them wild with rage. They were not men who liked to give anything away. Less still did they like anything to be stolen from them. So every night, each of them would take his shotgun and hide in a dark place somewhere on his own farm, hoping to catch the robber. But Mr. Fox was too clever for them. He always approached the farm with the wind blowing in his face, and this meant that if any man were lurking in the shadows ahead, the wind would carry the smell of that man to Mr. Fox's nose from far away. Thus, if Mr. Boggis was hiding behind his chicken house number 1, Mr. Fox would smell him out from 50 yards off and quickly change direction, heading for chicken house number 4 at the other end of the farm.
"Dang blasted lousy beast!" cried Boggis. "I'd like to rip his guts out," said Bunce.
He must be
killed," cried Bean.
"But how?" said Boggis.
"How on earth can we catch the blighter?"
Bean picked his nose delicately with a long finger.
"I have a plan," he said. "You've never had a decent plan yet," said Bunce. Shut up and listen, said Bean. "Tomorrow night we will all hide just outside the hole where the fox lives. We will wait there until he comes out. Then bang! Bang, bang, bang!" "Very clever," said Bunce. "But first we shall have to find the hole." "My dear Bunce, I've already found it," said the crafty Bean. "It's up in the wood on the hill. It's under a huge tree."
Dun, dun, dun. Who sold them out? Who sold out Mr. Fox? I don't know. Maybe Bean just found him by himself. Chapter 3, The Shooting. I'm already on page 21. That's crazy. "Well, my darling," said Mr. Fox, "what shall it be tonight?" "I think we'll have duck tonight," said Mrs. Fox. "Bring us 2 fat ducks, if you please. One for you and me, and one for the children." "Ducks it shall be," said Mr. Fox. "Bunce is the best." "Now, do be careful," said Mrs. Fox. "My darling," said Mr. Fox, "I can smell those goons a mile away. I can even smell one from the other. Boggis gives off a filthy stink of rotten chicken skins. Bunce reeks of goose livers. goose livers. Bunce reeks of goose livers. And as for Bean, the fumes of apple cider hang around him like a poisonous gas. There's no A in there. Like poisonous gases. Yes, but just don't get careless, said Mrs. Fox. You know they'll be waiting for you, all three of them. Don't you worry about me, said Mr. Fox. I'll see you later. But Mr. Fox would not have been quite so cocky had he known exactly where the three farmers were waiting at that moment. They were just outside the entrance to the hole, each one crouching behind a tree with his gun loaded. And what is more, they had chosen their positions very carefully, making sure that the wind was not blowing from them towards the fox's hole. In fact, it was blowing in the opposite direction. There was no chance of them being smelled out. Mr. Fox crept up the dark tunnel to the mouth of his hole. He poked his long, handsome face out into the night air and sniffed once. He moved an inch or two forward and stopped. He sniffed again. He was always especially careful when coming out from his hole. He inched forward a little more. The front half of his body was now in the open. His black nose twitched from side to side, sniffing and sniffing for the scent of danger. He found none, and he was just about to go trotting forward into the wood when he heard, or thought he heard, a tiny noise, a soft rustling sound, as though someone had moved a foot ever so gently through a patch of dry leaves. Mr. Fox flattened his body against the ground and lay very still, his ears pricked. He waited a long time, but he heard nothing more. It must have been a field mouse, he told himself, or some other small animal. He crept a little further out of the hole, then further still. He was almost right out in the open now. He took a last, careful look around. The wood was murky and very still. Somewhere in the sky, the moon was shining. Just then, his sharp night eyes caught a glint of something bright behind a tree not far away. It was a small silver speck of moonlight shining on a polished surface. Mr. Fox lay still, watching it. What on earth was it? Now it was moving. It was coming up and up. Great heavens! It was the barrel of a gun! Quick as a whip, Mr. Fox jumped back into his hole, and at that same instant, the entire woods seemed to explode around him. Bang, 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 bang! The smoke from the three guns floated upward in the night air. Bogus and Bunce and Bean came out from behind their trees and walked towards the hall. "Did we get him?" said Bean. One of them shone a flashlight in the hole, and there on the ground, in the circle of light, half in and half out of the hole, lay the poor, tattered, blood-stained remains of a fox's tail. Bean picked it up. "We got the tail, but we missed the fox," he said, tossing the thing away. "Dang and blast," said Bogus. "We shot too late. We should have let fly the moment he poked his head out."
"He won't be poking out again in a hurry,"
Bunce said. Bean pulled a flask from his pocket and took a swig of cider. Then he said, "It'll take 3 days at least before he gets hungry again enough to come out again." There's no again in there. "It'll take 3 days at least before he gets hungry enough to come out again. I'm not sitting around here waiting for that. Let's dig him out." "Ah," said Bogus. "Now you're talking sense. We can dig him out in a couple of hours. We know he's there."
"I reckon there's a whole family of them down that hole,"
Bunce said.
"We'll have the lot," said Bean. "Get the shovels."
Chapter 4. Geez, flipping through this pretty fast. Maybe this will be the last chapter. Or if this is really short, maybe the next chapter will be the last chapter. Down in the hole, Mrs. Fox was tenderly licking the stump of Mr. Fox's tail to stop the bleeding. "It was the finest tail for miles around," she said between licks. "It hurts," said Mr. Fox. "I know it does, sweetheart, but it'll soon get better." And it will soon grow again, Dad, said one of the small foxes. It will never grow again, said Mr. Fox. I shall be tailless for the rest of my life. He looked very glum. There was no food for the foxes that night, and soon the children dozed off. Then Mrs. Fox dozed off, but Mr. Fox couldn't sleep because of the pain in the stump of his tail. Well, he thought, I suppose I'm lucky to be alive at all. And now they've found our hole, we're going to have to move out as soon as possible. We'll never get any peace if we... What was that? He turned his head sharply and listened. The noise he heard now was the most frightening noise a fox can ever hear. The scrape, scrape, scraping of shovels digging into the soil. Wake up! He shouted. They're digging us out! Mrs. Fox was wide awake in 1 second. She sat up, quivering all over. Are you sure that's it? She whispered. I'm positive. Listen. They'll kill my children, cried Mrs. Fox. Never, said Mr. Fox. But darling, they will, sobbed Mrs. Fox. You know they will. Scrunch, scrunch, scrunch went the shovels above their heads. Small stones and bits of earth began falling from the roof of the tunnel. Began falling from the roof of the tunnel. How will they kill us, Mummy? Asked one of the small foxes. His round black eyes were huge with fright. Will they be dogs? He said. Mrs. Fox began to cry. She gathered her 4 children close to her and held them tight. Suddenly, there was an especially loud crunch above their heads, and the sharp end of a shovel came right through the ceiling. The sight of this awful thing seemed to have an electric effect upon Mr. Fox. He jumped up and shouted, I've got it now! Come on! There's not a moment to lose! Why didn't I think of it sooner? Why didn't I think of it before? Think of what, Dad? A fox can dig quicker than a man, shouted Mr. Fox, beginning to dig. Nobody in the world can dig as quick as a fox. The soil began to fly out furiously from behind Mr. Fox as he started to dig for dear life with his front feet. Mrs. Fox ran forward to help him. So did the 4 children. Go downwards, ordered Mr. Fox. We've got to go deep as we possibly can. The tunnel began to grow longer and longer. It sloped steeply downward. Deeper and deeper below the surface of the ground it went. The mother and the father and all 4 of the children were digging together. Their front legs were moving so fast you couldn't see them. And gradually, the scrunching and scraping of the shovels became fainter and fainter. After about an hour, Mr. Fox stopped digging. Hold it, he said. They all stopped. They turned and looked back up the long tunnel they had just dug. All was quiet. Phew, said Mr. Fox. They'll never get as deep as this. Well done, everyone. They all sat down, panting for breath. And Mrs. Fox said to her children, I should like you to know now that I hate the word if. I should like you to know that if it wasn't for your father, we should all be dead by now. Your father is a fantastic fox. Mr. Fox looked at his wife and she smiled. He loved her more than ever when she said things like that. Seems like a good place to stop. No. We'll go on for 3 more pages, a couple more pages. Chapter 5. The Terrible Tractors. As the sun rose the next morning, Bogus and Bunce and Bean were still digging. They had dug a hole so deep you could have put a house in it. You could have put a house into it, but they had not yet come to the end of the fox's tunnel. They were all very tired and cross.
Dang and blast, said Bogus. Whose rotten idea was this?
Bean's idea, said Bunce.
Bogus and Bunce both stared at Bean. Bean took another swig of cider, then put the flask back into his pocket without offering it to the others.
Listen, he said angrily. I want that fox. I'm going to get that fox. I'm not giving in till I've strung him up over my front porch, dead as a dumpling.
We can't get him by digging, that's for sure. We can't get him by digging, that's for sure, said the fat Bogus. I've had enough of digging. Bunce, the little pot-bellied dwarf, looked up at Bean and said,
Have you got any more stupid ideas, then?
What? Said Bean. I can't hear you.
Bean never took a bath. He never even washed. As a result, his ear holes were clogged with all kinds of muck and wax and bits of chewing gum and dead flies and stuff like that. This made him deaf.
Speak louder,
he said to Bunce, and Bunce shouted back,
Got any more stupid ideas?
Bean rubbed the back of his neck with a dirty finger. He had a boil coming there, and it itched.
What we need on this job, he said, is machines. Mechanical shovels. We'll have him out in 5 minutes with mechanical shovels.
This was a pretty good idea, and the other two had to admit it.
All right then, Bean said, taking charge. Bogus, you stay here and see the fox doesn't escape. Bunce and I will go fetch our machinery. If he tries to get out, shoot him quick.
The long, thin bean walked away. The tiny Bunce trotted after him. The fat Bogus stayed where he was, with his gun pointed at the foxhole. Suddenly, 2 enormous caterpillar tractors with mechanical shovels on their front ends came clanking into the wood. Bean was driving one, Bunce the other. The machines were both black. They were murderous, brutal-looking monsters.
Here we go, then, shouted Bunce.
Death to the fox!
The first one is Bean, the next one is Bunce.
Death to the fox!
Shouted Bunce. The machines went to work, biting huge mouthfuls of soil out of the hill. The big tree under which Mr. Fox had dug his hole in the first place was toppled like a matchstick. On all sides, rocks were sent flying, and trees were falling, and the noise was deafening. Down in the tunnel, the foxes crouched, listening to the terrible clanging and banging overhead. "What's happening, Dad?" cried the small foxes. "What are they doing?" Mr. Fox didn't know what was happening or what they were doing. "It's an earthquake!" cried Mrs. Fox. "Look!" said one of the small foxes. "Our tunnel's getting shorter. I can see daylight." They all looked round, and yes, the mouth of the tunnel was now only a few feet away. There's no that there. They all looked around, and yes, the mouth of the tunnel was only a few feet away from them now. And in the circle of daylight between them, they could see the two huge tractors almost on top of them. "Tractors!" shouted Mr. Fox. "And mechanical shovels! Dig for your lives! Dig! Dig! Dig!" And that's a good place to stop, I think. Yes. If you want to know the rest, then, watch the movie or, read the book. The book is, read the book. Books are cool. At least I think they're cool. Okay. So anyway, that was Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald Dahl, and that was a fun read. That was I like reading children's books. There's good ones anyway. There's a rhythm to the words that's always fun. That's missing from adult books and regular books. I don't know. It just seems like we just lose that poetry as we get older. Some people have that poetry for the rest of their lives in their works, like Neil Gaiman or Terry Pratchett or other authors that I read because, I enjoy that kind of rhythm. Whereas it's just, I don't know, and others just seem to think like, oh, if I write more words, that means it must be greater literature. And I just forgot to include Mark Twain amongst the number of people whose works are just a pleasure to read out loud and just read in general. There's music and poetry and rhythm and, missing from a lot of modern books. Anyway, So, I hope you enjoyed that. That was day 68, the second to last day of the 100 Days of Narration... 100 Days of Narration Challenge for the Roald Dahl week, rather. Not the second to last day of the 100 Days of Narration Challenge, because it would mean that I would be stopping the 100 Days of Narration Challenge on 70, rather than 100. Then it would be 70 Days of Narration Challenge, rather than 100, which would just make no sense whatsoever. No sense whatsoever. Yes. So, come back tomorrow for day 69. 69. 69 of the 100 Days of Challenge, where I will be reading my last Roald Dahl book. And given what I have left to read, I think you can guess what I'm going to read. Can you guess what I'm going to read? Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but I'm sure you can. It's a very popular book by Roald Dahl, which most people know of. Yes. All right. See you all tomorrow. Hey, you seem like a cool, wonderful, and or awesome individual with impeccable taste in voice actors. So why not follow me on Facebook or Twitter? You can keep up with the latest projects I'm in, or that my friends are in, or that you could be in, because I occasionally post links to open editions to various projects that require voice acting out there, or that nobody's in, but they're interesting projects nonetheless that you may also find interesting. Also, lots of random thoughts about whatever's on my mind at that particular moment. Usually it's about food or video games, or foodie video games. Anyway, you can follow me on Facebook at OmadonVA or Twitter at Omadon. Hope to see you there.